I talk a lot about puzzle pieces. So ADHD is just one of the puzzle pieces that make you unique. And there are struggles that are related to having ADHD, and there are superpowers. And so how do we problem solve the struggles and not become our identity, like you say? And then how do we kind of tease out the superpowers and exploit the heck out of those, right? Because you really want to know what makes you unique. What are your unique strengths?
Hello, and welcome to Mom Essentials. If you've ever felt like the quote unquote regular parenting advice just doesn't quite fit your kids, like you're working twice as hard and still feel like you're missing the manual, today's episode is for you. My guest today, Judy Richardson-Mahre, the founder of Kaleidoscope Coaching and Counseling, where she helps individuals, couples, and families navigating ADHD, parenting challenges, and the relationship dynamics that come with all of it. And here's what makes Judy so special. She's not just talking theory. She's a therapist, coach, and educator with over 30 years of lived experience in marriage and parenting neurodiverse kids. And as a mom of 4 children with ADHD, she gets in her bones the hard days, the beautiful days, and honestly, everything in between. She's known for being warm, relatable, and refreshingly real, and she's here to help us actually understand what's going on underneath the surface. So, Judy, welcome to Mom Essentials. I am so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Angie. That was a great introduction. Thank you. I got chills.
Oh, good. Well, you come with a lot of experience, so I cannot wait for you to share it with our listeners a little bit, not just about your own experience, but also some practical strategies that they can put into their parenting toolbox in order to help them if maybe they have some children who are neurodiverse.
Yeah,
So I would love.
absolutely.
Yes. Besides, your experience, obviously you got a lot of experience. You have the coaching, you have the counseling hat on, but truthfully, I don't think we get as much experience as that if we don't actually go through it ourselves, right? If we don't
Yeah.
have the parenting things, because we can have all the letters behind our names and all of the certificates on our shelves, but it's getting thrown into it and doing the parenting thing day to day. That's really what gives us the experience.
Yeah.
I've shared before, there's a parenting book out there, and I won't say it because maybe there's some listeners who really enjoy it, and that's perfectly fine. But I listened to the book, and I feel like I was rolling my eyes most of the time because the things that they put in there, it was so simplistic. And on one aspect, I'm like, yes, this is a great approach. But then the examples that the reader gave, or like the person who was reading the book, which was like a white old male, which may have been one of the reasons why I didn't relate very much to it either.
Right.
Uh, but so much of it, I was like, that is not what would happen. Our kids would not respond with that. Like how
Right.
this is like trying to put like the perfect like bow on something when in reality that's just not how it's going to go. So,
Right.
Judy, tell us a little
Exactly.
bit more about your experience and why you're so passionate about this work.
Well, I started out in a very different career. I was a mechanical engineer, and my husband and my oldest daughter were diagnosed at the same time. They both were diagnosed with ADHD. And so we walked out of that session where they were both diagnosed. And my husband looked at me and said, with tears in his eyes, "You mean I'm not just stupid?" It was a major aha moment for me and for him. And it was just amazing. I just became very passionate that I didn't want my kids to get that message. And it broke my heart that he got that message. So we did a lot of trying to figure out what ADHD was, what helps, how do I give my kids a different experience and a different message that was more resilient, was more positive, was more understanding and empathetic. And so I started researching, and long story short, got moved into getting my master's in marriage and family therapy. I became a therapist specializing in neurodiversity, and I've been doing that for the last 15 years. So,
Mm, I love it. And wow, what What an impactful story and journey for your husband and your child, because and I relate to that so much too, because my husband will see things about ADD and he'll be like, "Oh my gosh, like that makes so much sense." Actually, I think we
Yeah,
just saw something the other night and it was talking about the fact that um people with ADD or ADHD, they tend to stay up really late at night.
yeah,
And it's not because necessarily they're not trying to go to sleep, but it's the fact that for the first time in the day, they feel like their brain isn't like on hyper speed where they
right.
can actually relax. And I looked at my husband and I said, does that relate to you? And he's like, absolutely, because he does stay up
Absolutely.
really
Yeah,
late. And I'm like, "Why are you still up? You have to get up in the morning and you're always tired." But it's just the way the body functions. But I
right.
love the message that you're saying, like, you don't want your children to have to live with that messaging of, "Oh, you're stupid because you don't like fit into this square box, or
Right,
don't do this like other kids type of thing." Like, and now
right.
that we have so much more support and education and research, it's really getting the message of like, you're not ADHD, you have ADHD, and that's just a
Yes.
part of you. It's not your full identity.
Absolutely. And I talk a lot about puzzle pieces. So
Mm,
ADHD is just one of the puzzle pieces that
yeah.
make you unique. And
Yeah.
there are struggles that are related to having ADHD, and there are superpowers. And so how do we problem solve the struggles and not become our identity, like you say? And
Yeah.
then how do we kind of tease out the superpowers and exploit the heck out of those, right? Because you really want to know what makes you unique. What are your unique strengths? And then how does that drive your decisions and your career decisions and if and where you go to school, etc. All of those things. And it really kind of helps to separate ADHD from the person because you really want them to be able to self advocate, feel their own worth, feel their own value, and then deal with the struggles like the rest of us deal with struggles all the time. We're all kind of neurodiverse. Our brains work differently. All of our brains work differently. So how do we normalize that message for them?
Yeah, and it, like you just said, that's what makes us unique, right?
Right.
Actually, it was so funny last night. My daughter was talking about someone that she goes to school with, and she was like, "Yeah, she's kind of weird." And I was like, "But we're all a little weird. Like that's what makes it fun. Like we all have a
Yeah.
little weirdness in us. Like everyone's just weirdness looks different." And
Exactly.
so again, I love how you focus on like this is what makes you unique, and let's pull out our superpowers of it and not
Yeah.
think that it is a bad thing, because I'm assuming, and maybe this is how you felt as a mom too, just in the perspective of your children, like for those moms listening right now who are like, "Oh, like you're like, yeah, I feel like I keep trying all these things and nothing's working, and I feel like my child is not how the typical child is, and it's frustrating
Yeah.
as a parent, and it can feel kind of." I mean, did you go, maybe this is the question I want to start with, is like, did you go through any kind of grief of like,
Of
"Oh, my
course.
child
Yeah.
is going to be different than other children"?
Of course. And as I did all of this research to understand it, I came across a really alarming statistic that really broke my heart, along with the initial feeling that my husband got or message. But the statistic was that kids that have ADHD get up to 85% of their messages daily are negative messages. 85%. And that's an alarming statistic. But when you compare it to neurotypical kids get up to 15%. So exactly opposite. So these kids swim in negative messaging all the time. And how do you build kids that that are resilient when they're getting that overwhelming messages? And some of it is coming from us because they are frustrating, they are difficult to parent. You have to have a different approach. And so there is grief. Of course. It's kind of like that famous I planned to go to Paris and the plane landed in Norway. And so how do I adjust to um the differences and the different needs of my child?
Yeah. And if there's a parent listening right now and they're thinking, okay, parenting has been very challenging. Maybe it's, because their kid, maybe especially if they have multiple kids and maybe the kids are so vastly different when it comes to tasks and things like that. Or maybe they're hearing a lot of messages from school of, your child's doing this or they're not doing this and all of these things. What maybe are some cues that parents could look out for to be like, maybe we should look into this more?
Yeah. So, if there is struggles at school, any struggles at school kind of indicate something is different. Um, Teachers really know what is developmentally appropriate at each age, and so listen to the teachers. Get clues from teachers because they know what is developmentally appropriate for that age of child. But if you have a high energy kid, um, or they are really distracted, those typical signs. They are always late. They can't remember things. They're impulsive. Those are kind of the clues. But that's really much more typical for boys than girls. Girls present so differently. Many girls present kind of as daydreaming, like they get lost in their thoughts. Many girls are really killing themselves to meet the expectations and they're suffering in silence. So they're much more likely to internalize their frustrations and their pain. And so then you see more depression, more anxiety, more self-harm, and that type of thing with girls. But indicators are not always that they're doing well in school or not doing well in school, but that certainly can be one of them. Yeah.
Sure. Could you name maybe one or two other indicators if there's not school problems, but maybe other behaviors that the parents are seeing in the house?
Yeah, so oftentimes kids that are trying to hold it together at school come home and kind of fall apart. And
Mm,
they feel safe at home, so they act up more at home, and they're very uh, high energy, more defiant, more challenging the boundaries, high energy, the typical kind of bouncing off the walls, those kind of kids. Yeah, that's often what we see at home. In that they can't, sometimes it's issues with friends, that friendships are difficult. Um, and emotions. They live in kind of extreme emotions.
mm.
So if something is frustrating, they would be devastated. Or if something is funny, they're hysterical. And so they live in those extreme emotions and have a hard time kind of uh, developing or understanding what is appropriate and what is appropriate intensity. You really
Yeah.
have to understand the executive functions and what are all the executive functions and what is it, how do those executive function struggles show up? And once you
Yeah.
understand that, you kind of can see um, you know, all of those different behaviors and you see them different.
Yeah. Okay, Judy. So, since you said it, I want to dig into this a little bit about executive functioning because I think
Okay.
that there's a lot of parents listening right now that are like, what is she talking about? Like,
Okay.
what is executive functioning skills? Because
Yeah.
I also know that for these executive functioning skills, which we all have,
Yep.
children who are more neurodiverse can actually be delayed about 3 years in the
Yep.
development of these skills, which to a parent who doesn't understand what they are, this can be really frustrating. And we can
Yes.
see our as being defiant or not listening or fill in the blank. So can you just like briefly run over kind of like a high level what exactly executive functioning is and then maybe
Yes.
couple that sometimes are delayed that parents don't understand, misinterpret as,
Yeah.
unruly behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. So executive function. So every part of our brain is responsible for a function. So things that we think of as behavior are really functions of how our brain works. And the areas of our brain that are responsible for self-control and self-regulation, those are the areas of the brain that we call executive functions. So executive functions are things like working memory, your inhibitory system, your internal motivation, your ability to manage your emotions, your ability
Yeah.
to manage your materials, time management, um, your ability to read a room and adjust your behavior. All of those are examples of executive functions. And so this kind of flips parenting, what we know about or knew about parenting, on its head, right? Because we look at all of this behavior and then we look at how do we consequence um, from a discipline perspective to promote good behavior or discourage bad behavior. And
Mhm.
if this is not behavior, executive functions are not behavior, they're brain wiring. And so what appears as your ability or your behavior really is your executive function isn't working well and your brain neurology is not supporting you to do that behavior. And so that's the hardest thing, I think, for parents to really understand, that this is not behavior and consequences really don't work. And so, a couple of examples: the inhibitory system is the part of the brain that is responsible to help you stop and think, block out distractions, do all of those things you need to do to focus. If your inhibitory system is not working well, then you have impulsivity or you have difficulty managing your focus or your attention. It's not about paying attention because they can hyper focus. It's about
Mhm.
managing attention and picking and choosing what you're going to block out and what you're going to focus on. So
Yeah.
that's one. Another is internal motivation. So internal motivation, the part of your brain, excuse me, that is responsible for internal motivation, if that is not working well, then other parts of your brain step in and compensate for the lack
Mhm.
or the missing part, the lack of internal motivation. And the things that step in are your emotion centers. So kids get very defiant. It looks like defiance, but it isn't. It's the lack of internal motivation and emotions stepping in to try and really motivate the brain. So
Yeah.
understanding that at a deep level and modifying your approach accordingly is really important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love how you said it kind of flips parenting on its head because
Yeah.
I think it then, I always talk to the parents that I work with through my calm approach of the A stands for awareness and accountability. And so
Yeah.
I always say, like, it's time to be a detective. Like, let's start becoming curious of what's coming on, not with
Yes.
shame or guilt. Like, let's become curious of what the behaviors our children are doing are really telling us.
Right.
And I hope that with you saying about, executive functioning skills and listeners, I highly encourage you reach out to Judy, learn more, do some of your own research, like just kind of get inundated with these skills because they're so important. And it really turning parenting on its head because it's not that we're bad parents.
Right.
We didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
It's just maybe where our children are in the development again, and honestly, whether they're neurotypical or neurodiverse, like we're not all born with these executive functioning skills all ready to go,
No.
right? Like we
Right.
learn them and we develop them at different times. But I kind
Right.
of want to go back to something that you said, Judy, because I want to make sure that our listeners don't misinterpret it. Maybe with children with ADHD have the consequences that we put onto our other children, they don't work with this child, for example.
Right.
And I want to make sure people understand you're not saying just let your child get away with anything and
No.
everything if they have
No.
ADHD. So can
No.
you give an example of how we can kind of pivot our parenting to
Right.
align better with the needs of that child?
Right. So consequences don't work because for executive function issues, they work for behavior, but we have to understand that often difficulties that are related to deficits in the executive functions, those don't respond to consequences. And
Mm,
so you have to really take a different approach when you're looking at things like lying, like an impulsive answer to "Did you break the lamp?"
mm,
Is no, obviously, and most kids will respond no. And if you think a kid is lying or a child is lying and saying no, and then you consequence that lying behavior, then a child with ADHD doesn't get the chance to compensate or uh, figure out a way to learn how to stop and think. The real issue is the inhibitory system. It's
yeah.
the part of the brain, the executive function, that is helping that child stop and think. So for our neurodiverse kids, I often say, okay, back up, try again, let your brain catch up, and then answer the question. So your
Mhm.
impulsive response is, no, I didn't do that. We value honesty in our home. And so back up and then answer the question again. If the
Mhm.
child then lies, chooses to lie, well, then consequence that because that is behavior. But you're
Mm,
giving them a second chance because the inhibitory system and the executive function is delayed in
yeah.
development. And I want to clarify something. You said up to 3 years. Um, all of the executive functions are things that develop, like you said. They develop over time in everyone's brains. And the real delay is up to a third of their chronological age. So
Mm,
we say, as a general rule, at least 3 years, but it could be up to a third of their chronological age.
oh,
So
yeah.
when you're thinking of middle schools who are 12, they could be delayed up to 4 years. When you think
Mm,
of kids that are taking the permit test, they could be delayed up to 5 or 6 years. And kids
okay.
going to college, right, be delayed up to 6 years. So
Yeah.
it is a significant delay. You have to understand and kind of be the detective figuring out what is the how far behind are they on those different executive functions.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that clarification. And also thank you for that example about the lying for, the lamp.
Yeah,
Because again, I think as parents, especially when you have multiple kids, and if one or two of them are neurotypical and then we have a neurodiverse child with ADHD, that can
yeah,
be really difficult because you're already so stressed out as a mom. You feel like you have a million and one things to do, and you
right,
just get to the point in your day where you're like, "Can you just listen to me? Like, I am exhausted, and
right,
now you guys are doing this, and you're doing this,
yeah,
and why is me just telling you guys that not solving everything?"
right,
But we always talk about, again, wherever they fall, neurotypical, neurodiverse, is that every child is so uniquely different.
yes,
And
right,
I talk about it all the time of how I have twins and one's a boy, one's a girl. And obviously there's differences there, but there's still so many differences. And I need to use
right,
different tools for my son that I need to use for my daughter.
for
But
sure,
when you find out the right tool, and again, even if I want the same outcome, when I find out the right tool of how I can talk to my daughter versus how I can talk to my son, yes, it took work to get there, but oh my gosh, now that I have those tools in my toolbox that I
Ye
can rely back on, it makes it so much easier in the long run in order
yes,
to understand my child on an individual level.
yes,
So,
perfect. Yes, exactly.
Judy, I love how we kind of started out talking about these superpowers. And I want to just kind of touch on that as far as like, what if a mom is listening and they're like, Judy, yes, I have a child and they're so energetic and they, either I'm suspecting that they have ADHD or they already are diagnosed with it, but it's so much energy. And again, I'm exhausted. How do I turn that into a superpower for my son or daughter?
Yeah. You really have to look at what are their passions and their strengths. The high energy can be from a parenting perspective, like it's chaotic at home all the time, right?
Yeah.
But that can be a superpower when you find a passion help them find a passion. So that
Yeah.
high energy can be something where they hyper focus and they spend a ton of time on that passion. And
Yeah.
they can really excel and be very creative and do things that many people can't do because they have that energy. So
Yeah.
you really want to see where their passions lie, where their preferences. Many brains that have ADHD are interest based motivated versus importance based motivated. And so that means that the things that their brain is interested in, they will have a lot of motivation, internal motivation to do those things. And so, finding those passions and finding, the things that really, really rev them up. And
Yeah.
being honest about the struggles and the superpowers, they'll help you find the superpowers,
Yeah.
the things that they really excel at.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think again that kind of comes back, we started with talking about like if you're feeling some grief because you feel, your child is different or you're not you feel like you failed some way as a parent because it's difficult and
Yeah,
the things that your friends are telling you like, well, this always worked for my child is not working
right.
for yours. I think it's kind of letting go of some of that expectation versus
Yeah.
reality that we have because we have these babies and we bring them home and we think about all the things we want them to do and how we
Yes.
want their life to do. And guess
Right.
what? They're their own people. And
Right.
you know what? They're gonna have different interests maybe that get them highly motivated or
Right.
passionate that as parents we're like, what is that? Like, I don't get it. But I think
Yeah.
really embracing that and making sure
Yeah.
that we're giving them the space to explore those things.
Yeah, and there's grief kind of along the way of when they get into high school or middle school and you see other kids excelling at certain measures in school, or they're planning for college or whatever the things are. Your child may be taking a different path, but that doesn't mean the path is bad. There's no one recipe, and I told my kids that from the beginning. There is no one recipe to success. There's, a million recipes and we have to find the recipe that works for you. But there is grief and you do feel alone. So you have to kind of find your tribe and find your
Yeah.
posse of people that really understand and support you and support and understand your child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, I think with not even just technology, but the more information we have,
Yeah.
there's so much support out there, and I like to call it "find your elephants."
Yes.
So that you're supported, that you're surrounded in those vulnerable times when you are going through grief, or
Yes.
maybe you're seeing your child have challenges in school or with friend groups or in other relationships that you're getting the support from people who have been there, and also experts like yourself, Judy.
Yes.
I know too, if listeners, if you're resonating with this, obviously you can head to the show notes. You're going to be able to get connected with Judy. I have all of her information in there. I highly recommend reaching out to her, checking out her stuff. But she also has a very special gift for all of you today, and that is your 3-step ADHD planner. Can you tell my listeners why they'd want to go download that right now?
Yeah, it's one of the tools of teaching an individual that has a neurodiverse brain. And often it's not just kids, it's a parent as well that has a neurodiverse brain. And the 3-step ADHD planner really helps figure out how to break tasks down into more manageable chunks, more doable pieces, and then how to get started. Oftentimes, it's very difficult to get started doing a specific task. So, how do you encourage and how do you motivate and how do you um, help an individual learn those skills and those techniques? So that's what's in store if you reach out and get the three-step ADHD task planner.
Perfect. I love it. Listeners, again, head to the show notes. I'm going to have a direct link so you can go grab that up. But of course, I highly encourage you to reach out to Judy as well, especially if you're finding yourself in this space where you're needing more support. You're needing to find some of your elephants for your parade of support while raising children who are neurodiverse. So,
Yeah.
again, Judy, thank you so much for being on. I really enjoyed our
Thank you,
conversation.
Angie. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was an honor to be able to have you on. And again, listeners, head to the show notes. But we will see you next time on Mom Essentials. And of course, make sure you stick around for the Essential Minute coming up next. Hey, thanks for sticking around for this Essential Minute. If today's conversation with Judy got you thinking about attention and focus, you are going to love this one. So much of what she talked about, managing attention, blocking out distractions, getting started on a task, comes back to that focus piece. And focus is exactly what Intune is made for. Intune is doTERRA's focus blend, a rich mix of oils like patchouli, frankincense, ylang ylang, and Roman chamomile. It has an earthy, grounding aroma that's known for creating an environment that supports a sense of focus for busy moms and kids alike. Now, here are a few ways that you can use it. One, just open it up and swipe the roller on the back of your neck and wrist before homework time to help you set the tone for focus. You can also keep it in your bag and use it before a task you've maybe been avoiding. Remember Judy's point about how hard it can be to just get started? A quick roll and a deep breath can be your cue to begin. Now, if you want to add this to your parenting toolbox, head to the show notes and click on the link. Happy oiling! Thanks for listening to this episode of Mom Essentials. If you're looking for simple ways to bring more communication, connection, and calm into your home, head to theparenttoolbox.info and check out the Calm Family Planner. And as a special thanks for being a listener, you can take $5 off with the code ESSENTIALS. That's code ESSENTIALS. Want more tips in between episodes? Follow us on Instagram at theparenttoolbox. See you next time.